President-elect Joe Biden had his first look at some of the country's top secrets and potential threats earlier today. From now on, he and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will receive the Presidential Daily Brief. It's a highly classified report outlining high-level national security issues. This was their first time getting access to the information after the Trump administration's transition delays. Mr. Biden is beginning to fill out his administration's top intelligence picks. That means weighing who to appoint as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency. One person under consideration reportedly includes CBS News senior security contributor Michael Morell. He was the acting and deputy director of the CIA during the Obama administration. He is also the host of the CBS News podcast, Intelligence Matters. Michael, welcome. It's good to have you. So what type of information is typically included in the Presidential Daily Brief, and is there a big difference in them between administrations?
Elaine, it's great to be with you. I wish I was there with you in New York, but it's great this way too. So the president-elect and the vice president-elect will be getting the nation's most important intelligence analysis and the nation's most important intelligence collection. They'll each have a briefer. They'll each receive the president's daily brief, which is prepared every day for President Trump. But they'll also receive other intelligence items that their briefers select for them. It could be other analysis that's done by the intelligence community. It could be other collection that's done by the intelligence community. The president-elect and the vice president-elect will get to ask questions. Those questions can be answered by the briefer on the spot, or they can be answered the next day in a memo. During the transition from Bush to Obama, we even brought briefers to Chicago, deep experts on subjects, to spend 15 minutes, 30 minutes with then President-elect Obama. So this can be a really rich exercise for the president-elect and the vice president-elect.
So let's dig into that a little deeper. Put into context for us just how critical these intelligence briefings are for a president-elect before assuming office, in that critical period just before assuming office.
So one way to think about it is you're coming in the middle of a movie, right? So these stories that are updated in the president's daily brief are ongoing. And if you waited to Inauguration Day, it would be kind of difficult to catch up. So the idea is to get the president-elect and the vice president-elect into the stories as soon as you can, bring them up to date, have the briefer bring them up to date, have the briefer tell them what the previous parts of the story have been, so that on Inauguration Day, at 12:01 Inauguration Day, they are ready to make decisions to protect the country. That's the idea.
And Michael, you were the acting CIA director during the Obama administration. From your time working with then Vice President Biden, how do you expect him to approach the process?
So he is a great consumer of intelligence. He has deep foreign policy and national security expertise built over a lifetime. So he understands many of these issues. He knows personally the actors who will be talked about in the president's daily brief. But historically, he has been a very good consumer. He has taken his briefing every day. He has seen a briefer. He asks a lot of questions. He doesn't always agree. But when he doesn't agree, there's a intellectual basis for that disagreement, and there's a back and forth, and he's very open-minded and willing to change his mind, when presented with a solid argument.
Michael, I also want to ask you about Iran. Iran is blaming Israel for killing one of their top nuclear scientists. Israel is declining to comment. How do you expect that to impact tensions in the region, as well as President-elect Biden's goal to re-engage Iran on a nuclear deal?
So, Elaine, my guess is that the Israelis were indeed behind this assassination. And I think what the Israelis are trying to do is to create facts on the ground in Iran that make it more difficult for the Biden administration to re-engage with the Iranians. The idea is to actually strengthen the hardliners in Iran and therefore make it more difficult for Iranian moderates, to re-engage with the United States. So that's what the Israelis are trying to do here. And I think it is going to, Elaine, it is going to be more difficult than most people think for the Biden administration to re-engage with the Iranians because the hardliners have been strengthened over the past 4 years. And importantly, there's an Iranian presidential election coming up in 6 months or so. That's going to constrain what the Iranians are able to do. But Elaine, I think at the end of the day that the Iranian economy is in such bad shape, and they are hurting acutely from COVID, that they are almost going to be forced to come to the negotiating table. So despite efforts by Iran and quite frankly by the Trump administration to make it more difficult for the Biden administration to engage, I think the Iranians will at the end of the day be willing to do that.
Interesting, though, such a complicated geopolitical landscape you're describing. Michael, finally, the former director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency appeared on 60 Minutes this weekend. Chris Krebs, who is a lifelong Republican, said that he believed President Trump has been trying to, quote, scare people by undermining confidence in the election. Here's what Krebs said about recounts that have happened since Election Day. Let's listen.
And so that pretty thoroughly, in my opinion, debunks some of these sensational claims out there that I've called nonsense and a hoax, that there is some hacking of these election vendors in their software and their systems across the country. It's nonsense.
So what do you make of what we just heard from Krebs there?
So Chris Krebs is nonpartisan. I think he's a patriot. I think he and his agency did a fantastic job at protecting our election infrastructure in 2018 midterms and in this election that we just had. So I think the world of Chris. I do think, Elaine, that we all now know that this election is over and that Joe Biden is the winner. And I think it's time that we all look forward because instead of looking backwards here, look forward because the country is dealing with so many difficult issues, from COVID to the economy to how do we deal with China, how do we deal with North Korea, how do we deal with Iran. It's time to look forward here.
All right, Michael Morell. Michael, always so good to have your insight. Thank you.
Great to be with you, Elaine.